Abolition of Zamindari System. Rural poverty at the time of independence. Acute poverty was the major problem faced by India after independence. It is estimated that more than half the rural population, that is 55%, was very poor. They did not have access to any resources like land and any other employment. Agriculture sector labor opportunities were also limited. A large proportion of peasants were landless. At the time of independence, the idea to remove rural poverty by giving the lands to poor, the land cultivation was widely agreed. Thus, the Zamindari system was come to end. The agitations during the British rule forced attention on the problems of the peasants. The peasants wanted the government to reduce tax and free them from the zamindars and money lenders. They also demanded about their right to cultivate land. Land to the tiller was the slogan of them. Abolition of Zamindari and other intermediary tenures. In 1950s, all state governments passed a law to abolish Zamindari system. They also abolished all forms of forced labor like beggar and vetty. 3 types of landlords' controls were identified: collection of land revenue, control over cultivated land. This was subdivided into those cultivated by recognized tenants and those lands which were under direct cultivation of landlords. Control over forests and wastelands. The land reform rules were implemented to address these problems. Let us see. First of all, laws were passed to end the zamindari system. All landowners were to pay taxes directly to government. Since the zamindars would lose this source of income, the government decided to compensate them by lump sum or single payments, which was about 20 to 30 times more than their annual income. The lands cultivated by recognized tenants were handed over to them. They had to pay tax directly to the government and not through any intermediaries. When the government found that it had spent a lot of money in paying compensation to zamindars, it made a rule that the tenants would be given land only if they paid some price for it. Those who could pay became the owners of the land and were free from the burden of the landlord system. In all, about 2 to 2.5 crore tenants benefited and became owners of the land they filled. However, thousands of poor people who could not pay the price or could not recognize themselves as tenants remained landless. The law also said that the zamindars would be the owners of their own coast land which they cultivated directly either through sharecroppers or laborers. As per the new laws, the government took over the waste and forest lands held by zamindars. Andhra region. The Madras Estate Bill came into force in 1950. By this act, the zamindars and inamdars were paid compensation and the land under them was given to its cultivated tenants. This act did not affect the ryotwari holders who virtually functioned as landlords. Abolition of Jagirdari system in Telangana. In the Telangana region, the powerful peasants movement was started when the Nizam state was merged with India. In 1927, forced labor or vetty had been abolished, but this was not implemented and it was put to end in 1948. In 1945, when the Telangana movement was beginning, the Nizam had made laws to protect tenants. After merging of Hyderabad state with Indian Union, Safra-e-Khas, the personal freedom of Nizam was abolished. As per the Hyderabad Jagidgar Abolition Act, large jagirs were taken over by governments. These lands were later distributed to farmers for cultivating it. The new government appointed the Hyderabad Agrarian Reforms Committee to primarily look into the question of land concentration and aspects of increasing production, etc. The committee made far-reaching recommendations like removal of middlemen, ceiling on land ownership, taking away surplus lands from the landlords, production of tenants, etc. In 1950, the famous Hyderabad Tenancy Act was passed to protect all types of tenants. All tenants who were in continuous possession of land for 6 years were made protected tenants or pattadars after a little payment. Then they could continue to cultivate the land for generations. Tenants at will is an agreement between a landlord and a tenant. As per this will, a tenant can evict at the will of landlords. These tenants at will were made to protect tenants. In 1955, the Hyderabad Inam Land Abolition Act was passed. The government made many laws to abolish the Zamindari system, but due to the delay in implementation, the large landlords used this delay for searching the loopholes in the Tenancy Act to regain control over the lands from the tenants. The zamindars, after abolishing, continued as big landlords, claiming the land as their own. They diverted their lands to set up industries. Bhudan movement. Telangana landlordism and the armed peasants' rebellion caused much concern among people in the country. Sarvodaya leader Acharya Vinoba Bhave wanted to solve the problem of the land concentration through peaceful means, that is, through Bhudan movement. Bhudan means donating land to the landless. He wanted to take voluntary gifts of land from the landlords and donate it to the landless. On April 18, 1951, Vinoba started the Bhudan movement. It was hailed a milestone in the history of land reforms. As part of the Sarvodaya movement, Vinobaji came to Sivarampalli near Hyderabad. He walked up to Pochampalli in Nalgonda district. A prayer meeting was held in their village. In that meeting, 40 families belonging to the scheduled caste requested for land. During the meeting, Vidhare Ramachandra Reddy denoted 250 acres of land in the memory of his father. Maisaya was the first person to receive the land. Inspired by this, Vinobaji took up Bhudan movement and later converted into Gramdan movement. Vinobaji received 44 lakh acres of land as donation all over the country. However, this movement did not make any serious difference to the land problem in the country, as landlords continued to hold large tracts of fertile land. Land Ceiling Act 1972-75. The Zamindari abolition did not solve the problem of land concentration. Table 1 shows the structure and distribution of land holdings in Andhra Pradesh from 1956 to 2006. From this table, we can say that after the land reforms were completed in 1955 to 56, more than half the peasant families had less than 2 hectares of land. Big landlords still continued about 38% of all cultivatable land in the state. Kisan Sabs became active agitating for further land reforms. This meant that the government should set a limit to large land holdings and take over surplus land and redistribute it to the landless travelers and small farmers. sharing 1955 to 56, 1980 to 81, 2005 to 6. Share in number of land holdings, share in cultivated area, share in number of land holdings, share in cultivated area, share in number of land holdings, share in cultivated area. Small, 0 to 2 hectares, 58%, 18%, 73%, 29%, 83%, 48%. Medium, 2 to 10 hectares, 32%, 44%, 25%, 52%, 16%, 46%. Large, 10 above hectares, 10%, 38%, 2%, 90%, 1%, 6%. Total 100%, 100%, 100%, 100%, 100%, 100%. The structure and distribution of land holdings in Andhra Pradesh 1956 to 2006. Read the figures for the year 1955 to 56 carefully. It tells us that after the land reforms had been implemented, 58% of farmers were small farmers with less than 2 hectares of land each. Even though they formed more than half of all farmers, they had less than 20% of cultivated land. On the other hand, we can say that large farmers or landlords who were only about 10% of the farmers had about 38% of all cultivated land. After the land ceiling was implemented in 1970s, the number of small farmers who were 58% increased to 83%. Medium farmers now were less in number and controlled 32 to 16% less than before. Large landowners declined to less than 1% but still owned about 6% of land. This situation was similar all over the country. So the central government initiated a second phase of land reforms to set limit to the size of land holdings and redistributing land to the poor. Land Ceiling Act was passed in 1972, which came into implementation in 1975. The Act defined family with 5 members as a unit. A family of 5 members can have maximum of 10 to 27 acres of irrigated land and 35 to 54 acres of dry land. In Andhra Pradesh, about 8 lakh acres were declared surplus. The Act could not be implemented properly due to machinations of the landlord and also lack of sufficient political determination of the government. Several landlords gave false declarations to the officials and did not reveal the excess land. Anticipating the Act, several landlords transferred their lands in the name of their relatives. West Bengal state was effectively run this Act. The West Bengal government acted with great determination and mobilized the landless and small peasants to participate in the implementation of the ceiling laws. As a result, around 12,94,000 acres of land were taken over by the government and 10,64,000 acres were distributed to about 26,51,000 families. This showed us that political will can make these measures very effective and really enable poor to get access to the land resources.